Dear ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to be here today to talk about the prospects for future regulation of online gambling from a European perspective. This topic is of special relevance at the moment, as most European countries are currently revising their gambling legislation or have recently introduced new legislation, such as the Hellenic Republic. As rapporteur of the European Parliament, I had the opportunity to take a leading role in formulating the Parliament's position on this issue. Today, I am pleased to give you an update about the ongoing discussions at the EU level, which may also have implications for the Greek legislation. There are very exciting times for the gambling sector. With a short period of time, the Internet has opened up plenty of new possibilities for gambling operators to offer the different services across borders. As a consequence, online gambling has quickly evolved into a fast-growing market with annual revenues of 8.5 billion euros, which is expected to reach 13 billion euros by 2015. Representing 45% of the world's market, Europe is leader in this expanding sector. Apart from the economic benefits, this has also created some problems, as the legislation in many European countries has been outpaced by the rapid technological developments. Today, consumers can easily play on websites that are either not regulated at all or in other jurisdictions. This leads to a situation where a single member state are no longer able to guarantee sufficient consumer protection for the citizens. Children and victims of gambling addictions are most affected by this situation. Further, member states lose millions of euros of taxpayers' money every year to illegal operators, especially they do not provide for a sufficient legal offer of online gambling services through a regulating opening of their markets. According to industry estimates, the unregulated online market in 2009 reached 850 million euros in gross gaming revenue in Germany alone. This means that less money can spend for benevolent and public interest activities like grassroots sports or combating addiction. Finally, legally uncertainty and unnecessary bureaucracy hinder the cross-border provision of gambling services in the internal market. As a principle of mutual recognition does not apply to this sector, and there are no European licensing standards, the Commission has to decide on a case-by-case basis if the practices of the Member States are in conformity with EU law. The existent extent of legal uncertainty is illustrated by the significant number of infringement procedures in recent years. Unfortunately, the European Commission has not taken action on any of the pending procedures since 2008. In spite of all these problems, online gambling is still regulated exclusively at national or even regional level, like in my home country, Germany. The policy options chosen by member states could not be more different. They range from outright prohibitions of any form of online gambling, like in Hungary and until recently in Greece, to perfectly liberalized markets, for instance, in Malta and the UK. Urgent action is needed in order to fill the growing gap between legislation and reality. In 2008, before my time in the European Parliament, the Parliament adopted its first resolution on online gambling based on the report by the socialist MEP Christel Schaldemose from Denmark. The text very much defended the status quo and did not include any reference to the possibility of a common regulatory framework. But since then, a lot has changed. With a view to the new realities, more and more countries have reformed their gambling legislation. Recent examples include Denmark, Spain, and also Greece. The Commission has also seems to have realized that these busy times provide a window of opportunity for increased EU action. As a first step, the Commission listed various policy options in the Green Paper, which it submitted to a public consultation earlier this year. At the moment, the Commission is finishing its evaluation of the responses. In addition, the Commission has organized a number of expert workshops on some of the most important issues. In response to the Green Paper, the European Parliament adopted its own position on the questions raised. As a Parliament's rapporteur, I was responsible for drafting the report and facilitating compromises between the different political groups. My main objective was to achieve a sensible compromise, which is ambitious, but can still be supported by a broad majority of the Parliament. This was so important because only a strong support from the Parliament would put the European Commission in the position to adopt an ambitious proposal. It was not an easy task to reconcile the often conflicting views on this subject. On the one hand, there were the defenders of the free market, who would like to liberalize online gambling completely within the internal market, applying the principle of mutual recognition. On the other hand, there were the defenders of the state monopolies who think that this is the only way to protect consumers and to combat organized crime. Lobbies on both sides were very active in trying to influence MEPs. But also non-national interests were very influential. This explained the large number of amendments tabled on my draft report. It was more than 270. In spite of these obstacles, I'm very satisfied with the overall result. On the 6th of October, the Committee for the Internal Market and Consumer Protection adopted my report by 30 votes in favor, 3 abstentions, and only 1 vote against. On the 15th of November, the European Parliament as a whole adopted the report as a non-legislative resolution with broad support across all political groups. And I can already tell you that we made a huge step compared to the resolution to 2008. The resolution sets out a comprehensive set of actions in order to address the current challenges and opportunities related on online gambling in Europe. While some of the statements are of a general nature, others address the member states, the European Commission, or both. In order to give you a broad overview, I will first present you the general claims and then focus on the large number of specific respects for action which we put forward to the European Commission. Finally, I will touch on the first reaction from Commissioner Barnier, who has also announced an action plan for the next year. In the speech before the European Parliament, he announced the action plans for March 2012. Let us start with the general claims. First of all, the resolution underlines that the subsidiarity principle, of course, also applies to online gambling. This means that member states should have the right to regulate it and control online gambling within their jurisdiction in accordance with their traditions and culture as far as this is possible. We have to respect the decision of some member states to determine a number of operators, types of gains on offer and volumes of it in order to protect consumers and prevent crime. However, according to the European Court of Justice, such restrictions to the legal offer must comply with certain rules. They must be proportionate, comply with internal market rules, and reflect a concern to limit activities in that sector in a consistent and systematic manner. For example, it is not acceptable that on one hand a state justifies its monopoly with consumer protection, and on the other hand it promotes the public gambling services with aggressive advertising campaigns. Recent experience, including my home country Germany, has shown that this still is too often the case. It remains to be seen if the Commission will approve the new German gambling law, which is supposed to enter into force at the end of this year. I have serious doubts about it. Also, the new Greek gambling law, which was passed in August 2011, gives many reasons to worry, since it restricts the legal offer in ways that appear to be neither consistent, systemic, nor proportionate. On the one hand, a private company, OPAP, keeps its monopoly on terrestrial gambling and the games that it already operates, which it received without any prior competitive procedure in the first place. While claiming to attain public interest objectives, OPAP is essentially profit-oriented and not subject to any meaningful state control. As the only European gambling operator listed at the stock exchange, OPAP is a commercial company by definition and is obliged to constantly seek to increase its profit and the value of the company to the benefit of its shareholders. The commercial character of OPAP is reflected in a systematic policy of expansion of the range of games offered and vigorous marketing advertising strategy. As a result of these policies, OPAP increased its turnover from 1.7 billion euros in 2000 to 5.3 billion euros in 2008, making it the largest operator of games of change in the world on a spend per capita basis and the second biggest sports betting operator in the world. This is a little bit a prescription what OPAP is doing, and if the monopoly, which is not handled by public authorities, if this could be, or is this in line with the rules or with the decisions of the European Court of Justice. On the other hand, the new legislation deregulates the whole internet betting sector. Also, internet betting has been repeatedly found by the European Court of Justice to present more serious risk compared to terrestrial betting. At the same time, the legislation provides for strict penalties for any person who, as betting agent, player, intermediary, and advertiser, acts in breach of OPAP's monopoly. The legislation has, of course, been challenged by private operators and has been referred to the European Court of Justice for a preliminary ruling. I would be very surprised if the current legislation can be upheld. In order to reduce further future violations of the EU treaties and to create fair competition in the internal market, the resolution of the European Parliament sets out certain quality standards for national licensing systems. If a member state decides to introduce a licensing system, it must comply with the principle of transparency and non-discrimination. To this end, national licenses models should enable European gambling providers to apply for a license if they meet the conditions imposed by the host member state. Furthermore, license application procedures should reduce administrative burdens by avoiding the unnecessary duplication of requirements and controls carried out in other member states, while leaving the final decision to the regulator in the host member states. Furthermore, one of the guiding principles of the report is a notion of active subsidiarity. Active subsidiarity applies to areas which essentially lie in the competence of the member states, but where an added value can be achieved through extended cooperation. Examples include common standards agreed by national regulators, for example in the form of a pan-European code of conduct, joint actions against online gambling operators which operate without the required national license. The European Commission should take a coordinating role in such activities. With a view to combating fraud and in particular preserving the integrity of sports, we call for a common definition of sports fraud, which should be penalized as a criminal offense throughout Europe. Further, we call for a framework for cooperation among sports disciplinary bodies, public authorities, and gambling operators, and better coordination among EU member states, Europol, and Eurojust. In this respect, member states are invited to consider dedicated prosecution services with primary responsibility for investing, match-fixing, casing. Let us now look at the specific request put forward to the European Commission. Most importantly, the resolution calls on the Commission to explore, I quote, all possible tools or measures at the EU level with regard to protecting vulnerable consumers, to preventing addiction and combating illegal operators in the field of gambling, including formalized cooperation between national regulators, common standards for operators, or a framework directive. For me, it was very important to mention the possibility of a framework directive which would establish much-needed common minimum standards in these areas. The resolution makes clear that the EU needs to adopt common standards for consumer protection. Such common standards should cover, amongst others, electronic identification, including age verification, restrictions for electronic payments, a limitation to one account per player and website, as well as information requirements to website operators. The Parliament underlines that control and protection processes need to be in place before any gaming activities begins. Moreover, the European Commission is asked to offer support for consumers who have been affected by illegal practices and to prompt the formation of a European network for the exchange of best practices in the treatment of gambling addictions. The report also calls on the Commission and Member States to collect and publish statistics on all types of gambling and gambling addiction in order to produce comprehensive data on the entire European gambling sector and to devise effective strategies against gambling addiction. In order to set up the fight against illegal gambling, the resolution calls on the Commission to, I quote, examine the possibility to propose a legal binding instrument obliging banks, credit card issuers, and other payment system participants in the UE to block transactions between their clients and gambling providers that are not licensed in their jurisdiction. The system in the United States could serve as an example in many ways. I'm in favor of the measure for numerous reasons. First, it makes life more difficult for illegal operators. Second, it channels the demand to legal offers, which create tax revenues for member states. And third, blocking financial transactions is by far the better alternative to blocking websites, which is already done in France and Italy. Finally, my report urges the European Commission to fulfill its role as guardian of the treaties and to pursue the pending infringement proceedings in order to ensure consistency of member states' gambling legislation with European law. You can see from this summary that the European Parliament is strongly in favor of a more active involvement of the European Union in the regulation of online gambling, and I will add only the problems like gambling addiction and fraud or fighting against fraud can be solved on Europe. It's my opinion, can be solved on European basis. But what does the European Commission say to this? As I mentioned in the beginning, Commissioner Barnier, who is responsible for gambling, has been careful in announcing plans for legislative proposals due to the sensitivities in many member states and respectively conflicting views in the College of Commissioners. All the more encouraging was his first reaction to the Parliament's resolution. Ahead of the vote in the European Parliament, the Commissioner welcomed our recommendations and announced the Commission for March 2012 announced the communication for March 2012, which will also include an action plan for concrete initiatives to be taken at the national and the EU level. In his speech, Commissioner Barnier recognized that there was a broad consensus in favor of concrete actions and a common regulatory frame at the European level, which respect the idea of active subsidiarity. While he excluded complete harmonization at this point, it's clear because of the subsidiarity principle, he expresses his preference for concrete common actions in 6 key areas. As a first step, the Commissioner pledged to strengthen the dialogue between national regulators in order to build mutual trust, which is a condition for successful cooperation. For this purpose, Mr. Barnier announced to organize a first meeting between national regulators in the coming weeks. Based on the success and conclusions of this progress, the Commissioner will work on legislative initiatives and minimum standards if he manages to convince his colleague in the Colleague of Commissioners. You must know we have in the Colleague of Commissioners a very broad variety. On the one hand, you have the commissioners coming from the UK or Malta, which has a free market, and on the other hand, you have also commissioners who are coming from countries which have still a monopoly, and he needs a majority in the Colleague of Commissioners, and that's why he is very careful to make announcements. But it was very interesting in the speech before the European Parliament that he announced action, and I will continue to introduce you this action. Mr. Barnier agreed in particular that we need common minimum standards for consumer protection, since member states are not able to protect consumers and citizens on their own way. Gambling operators and national regulators would be closely involved in the standard-setting process in order to ensure a high level of protection for all European citizens. Third, the Commission is going to step up the fight against fraud by including online gambling in the scope of the Directive Against Money Laundering, which currently covers only the casinos. This would be a significant advance in creating a European framework for online gambling. The fourth key issue identified by the Commissioner is gambling addiction. He agreed with the Parliament's position that in order to devise effective policies against addiction, we need more scientific evidence. Therefore, the Commission is likely to follow our recommendation and collect comprehensive data and carry out more studies in order to better understand the causes and patterns of addiction. The integrity of sport is a fifth key issue. The Commissioner showed interest in the Parliament's claim for a European definition of sports fraud as a criminal offence, but at the same time underlined that the feasibility of such a definition must subject to in-depth legal analysis. Furthermore, the Commissioner supported our call for a better cooperation between sports organisations, operators and regulators to prevent match fixing. Finally, the Commissioner responded to the Parliament's request to follow up on pending infringement procedures, pledging that the Commission will fulfil its responsibility to ensure Member States' compliance with the treaties. In conclusion, the Commission has already taken up many of the recommendations from the European Parliament. If Commissioner Barnier succeeds to implement the announced action plan, this would be a big step forward for the regulation of online gambling in Europe, which should set a clear framework for national regulation. This European framework will assist Member States in adopting coherent approaches to determine the degree of openness of their market, offering attractive conditions for legal operators, effectively fighting illegal operators, and last but not least, ensuring a high level of consumer protection.
Wann glauben Sie, dass die grüne Bibel mehr oder weniger in Europa wirklich angewendet wird, also in Form von einem europäischen Gesetz oder sowas?
Yeah, the problem you have to see, we have the subsidiarity principle. This means the subsidiarity principle that the member states are requiring. And when they are still staying on a monopoly, you have no chance on that. But the European Court of Justice gives a few rules out on it, and that's why I doubted a little bit of the Greek legislation and also the German legislation. You know that it was not accepted by the European Commission, and although the new Staatsvertrag, which the Länder presented to the European Commission will also perhaps not be. The legislation the province Schleswig-Holstein gave to the Commission was accepted by them. What I find out, you come, and that is I'm convinced about that you come to a license system. And when you come to a license system, the authorities who give the licenses out must be open, that everybody has a chance to that. And what we can do on European basis, when you cannot solve the problems, that I'm in favor for a directive, but to do that, and make a minimum harmonization. So you fight against fraud, against gambling addictions, against match fixing and all these things, that you have also a stronger power against these gambling operators who are coming from Asia, who are very illegal, and you have to fight against that. And that's why also I made a proposal how you can fight against illegal operators, and that you have to come to a license system, that everybody has a chance to get the license. But then when you have no license, you are illegal, and when you have to, what you do to fight it, I make an example, is that there no transactions will be allowed, that you have a blacklist for the illegal ones, or you have a white list for the legal ones, whatever you do, and that the state doesn't allow transaction. And I think this is the most effective thing to fight against illegal gambling operators, and that I have learned from the United States, because online gambling is not allowed there, but it's also interesting what is not allowed is betting on sports. The National Football League and so are not interested that you can have betting on sports. I would not do this in Europe, but only for an example, and it's very interesting on that issue. But first of all, the member states have to decide what they do, but it must be under the law or the rules of the European Court.
This is a question from gameforward.com. It's how do you think the gambling market will evolve in Greece within the next 5 years following its contemporary legalization?
It's not so difficult. It's a question how we will open the market. I have learned that
I'm asking because some people say that there are no foundations for its evolution. That's why I'm asking. What do you think?
I think we will get a liberalized market in the next few years, that you have a better chance to get a license on that. And you know we have a wide range on that market. On the one side you have Malta and UK, which have a definitely big liberalized market with mutual recognition, and on the other side you have the monopolies. But I have found out, like in Germany, that the monopolies are weakened more and more. And most of the member states like Denmark, like Italy, like France, like here in Greece, but you have a special thing here, but they are opening their market with the license systems, and that could increase the market. But what would be the outcome, I don't know.